Hello Year 2 and welcome to your first online reading lesson. So today we're going to be looking at retrieving information from a text. So picking parts of the text apart so that we can answer questions, finding specific information in the text to answer those particular questions. Now, today we're going to be starting a new book, which is called Pumpkin Soup by Helen Cooper. Has anybody read that book before? Brilliant if you have, but don't worry if you haven't, because we're going to be reading it together in a bit. Now, before we read it, I'd like us to make some predictions. Now, can you remember from last week what a prediction is? Yes, that's right. A prediction is when we guess what's going to happen based on a picture or what we've already read in a text. Now, we haven't read the Pumpkin Soup book yet, so we can't predict based on text. So we're going to predict based on the front cover. So here's the front cover of Pumpkin Soup. Let's have a look what we can see. We can see a cat, we can see a duck, we can see a squirrel, and they're drinking something by the looks of it. So what I'd like you to do in a minute is pause the video and have a go either by yourself, so just thinking about them, or talking to whoever you're with about them. What do you think the book might be about? What can you see on the front cover? What time of year might this book be set? And what sort of story will it be? Will it be a funny story? Will it be an adventure story? Will it be a happy story, a sad story? What sort of story do you think Pumpkin Soup will be? Okay, so pause the video now and have a think about these questions. Okay, Year 2, how did you get on with your predictions? In a bit, we'll be able to see if you were right. Now, before we do that, we're going to look at some vocabulary that you will come across in the text. Now, you might have seen some of these words before and you might know what they mean. But if you don't worry, because we're going to go through them together. So we've got slurp, scoff, murmur or mumble, wonder, a racket, trudge, a row, and scramble. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is pause the video, see if you know what any of this vocabulary means. Okay, pause the video now. Okay, should we see if you're right? So the first one, slurp. Did you know what that meant? Yes, that's right. Slurp is when you are drinking something and you make lots and lots of noise. So, for example, you could slurp your soup, you could slurp your tea, your coffee, your hot chocolate, your water. So when you're drinking, you make lots of noise. It's very noisy. Okay, number 2, we've got scoff. Now, if you scoff something, you eat it very, very quickly. So you could scoff your dinner because it's nice. You could scoff some chocolate. You could scoff some cake. Okay, lots of different types of food that you could scoff. Eat them really quickly because they're yummy. Okay, then we've got murmur or mumble. Now, did you know what murmur or mumble meant? Yes, that's right. Murmur and mumble mean when you talk quite quietly and the other person can't hear what you're saying. And you might be talking in a mumble because you don't want the other person to hear what you're saying. So they might not be able to make out exactly what you're saying because you're talking so quietly and they can't work it out. Now, number 4, wonder. If you're wandering around, you're walking slowly, you don't really have an aim to your walk, so you don't have a purpose. Okay, so you could be wandering through the forest, or you could be wandering down the street and you're walking very, very slowly. And we've got a racket. Now, a racket, what was that? Yes, that's right. A racket is when there's lots of noise. So, for example, if you were playing musical instruments, it would be a racket, wouldn't it? There'd be lots and lots of noise. Now, you could also have a racket if a baby's crying. If they're crying and making lots of noise, that's also a racket. And a racket's not always a pleasant noise. It's not always a nice noise to listen to. Then we've got trudge. Now, trudge is when you're walking really slowly and it's quite difficult to walk. Your feet are very heavy. Okay, so you could trudge through the snow. That's not very easy to do, is it? Or you could trudge through some mud. Your feet are heavy and it's hard to walk through those things. Then we've got a row. Well, a row is like an argument, isn't it? And the last one, we've got scramble. Now, in the story, one of the characters is scrambling down something. So if you scramble, it's quite hard to do. Okay, for example, if you're scrambling up a mountain, it's really difficult to do it and you might be quite tired by the time you get to the top. Okay, so that's some vocabulary that we will find in the text. Now, are you ready to read the story with me? So you can either follow along on the document that I've sent you with the story on, or you can just listen to me for now. Okay, so let's start. Pumpkin Soup by Helen Cooper. Deep in the woods, there's an old white cabin with pumpkins in the garden. There's a good smell of soup, and at night, with luck, you might see a bagpiping cat through the window, and a squirrel with a banjo, little guitar, and a small singing duck. Oh, I wonder who they might be. Pumpkin soup, the best you ever tasted, made by the cat, who slices up the pumpkin, made by the squirrel, who stirs in the water, made by the duck, who scoops in a pimpkin of salt and tips in just enough. They slurp their soup and play their song, then pop off to bed in a quilt stitched together by the cat, embroidered by the squirrel. So that's when you do a pattern on something, if you embroider it, and filled with fine feathers from the duck. And it's peaceful in the old white cabin. Everyone has his own job to do. Everyone is happy, or so it seems. Ooh, what do we think's going to happen next? Shall we find out? But one morning the duck woke up early. He tiptoed into the kitchen and smiled at Squirrel's special spoon. What does it mean if you tiptoe somewhere? Yes, that's right, you tiptoe if you're being really quiet. Okay? If you're walking very, very quietly so that someone doesn't hear you. Fantastic. So he's tiptoed into the kitchen and smiled at Squirrel's special spoon. Wouldn't it be fine, he murmured, if I could be the head cook? He drew up a stool, hopped on top, and reached until his beak just touched the tip of the spoon. Kerplunk! Down it clattered. Then the duck trotted back to the bedroom, held up the spoon, and said, "Today it's my turn to stir the soup." Sure, he's quite happy with himself, isn't he? "That's mine!" squeaked the squirrel. "Stirring is my job. Give that back." "You're much too small," snapped the cat. "We'll cook the way we always have." But the duck held on tight until the squirrel tugged with all his might, all his strength, and whoops! The spoon spun through the air and bopped the cat on the head. Then there was trouble. A horrible squabble, so an argument, a row, a racket, a rumpus in the old white cabin. Oh dear. "I'm not staying here," wailed the duck. "You never let me help with anything." And he packed up a wheelbarrow, put on his hat, and waddled away. "You'll be back," stormed the cat, "after we've cleaned up." And the squirrel shook his spoon in the air, but the duck didn't come back. Not for breakfast, not even for lunch. "I'll find him," scoffed the cat. "He'll be hiding outside. I bet he's in the pumpkin patch." But the duck was not in the pumpkin patch. They could not find him anywhere. Oh dear, I wonder where he is. So they waited all that long afternoon. The cat watched the door. The squirrel paced the floor. If you pace something, you walk forwards and backwards lots and lots of times. And you're quite nervous if you're pacing. "That duck will be sorry when he comes home," they muttered. But the duck didn't come home, not even at soup time. The soup wasn't tasty. They'd made it too salty. They didn't feel hungry anyway. They both sobbed over supper, and their tears dripped into the soup and made it even saltier. "We should have let him stir the soup," sniffled the squirrel. "It was only trying to help," wept the cat. "Let's go out and look for him." The cat and the squirrel were scared as they wandered down the path in the dark, dark woods. They feared for the duck all alone with the trees, and the foxes, and the wolves, and the witches, and the bears, but they couldn't find him. On and on they trudged until they reached the edge of a steep, steep cliff. Maybe he fell down that, wailed the cat. I'll save him, squeaked the squirrel, and he scrambled down on a long, shaky rope. He searched all around on the ground, but he couldn't find the duck. Then the duck whispered in a sad little voice, Duck might have found some better friends. He might, sighed the squirrel, friends who let him help. And the more they thought about it as they plodded back, the more they were sure they were right. But when they were almost home, they saw light shining from the old white cabin. It's Duck, they shrieked as they burst through the door. And the duck was so happy to see them. He was also very hungry, and although it was late, they thought they would all make pumpkin soup. When the duck stirred, the cat and the squirrel didn't say a word, not even when the duck stirred the soup so fast that it slopped right out of the pot, not even when the pot got burnt. Then the duck showed the squirrel how to measure out the salt, and the soup was still the best you ever tasted. So once again, it was peaceful in the old white cabin until the duck said, what do you think he might have said? Shall we play the bagpipes? Okay, the end. What did you think of the story? Did you enjoy it? I certainly did, and I'm looking forward to doing more work on it. So here, we're doing some retrieval questions. So we're going to do an example one together first. So what might you see deep in the woods at night? So it says what. Now we're looking for a thing if it says what, aren't we? Because if it was how, it'd be a way. If it was who, it'd be a person. If it was when, it'd be a time. If it was where, it'd be a place. But here we've got what. What might you see deep in the woods at night? Now this is found on the first page of the book. So if you'd like to have a look as well. So deep in the woods, there's our deep in the woods at night. Now we're looking for what you might see. Here you go. You might see a bagpiping cat through the window and a squirrel with a banjo and a small singing duck. Now, year two, from when we've done this before, do I like you just to write a cat, a squirrel and a duck? No, I don't, do I? Would I like it if you said a bagpiping cat through the window and a squirrel and a small singing duck? No, I like you to answer your questions in full sentences, don't I? So should we see what I've put? I've put at night you might see. So there you go. There's my sentence opener. It introduces my answer, and that makes sure that I extend my answer and don't just write the facts. It's a full sentence. So at night you might see a bagpiping cat, a squirrel with a banjo, and a small singing duck through the window of their old white cabin. So not only have I said what you might see, I've said where you might see it, because it says in the woods, but I want to give even more detail and say where in the woods. Okay, so you can expand your answers and make them even more detailed as long as you answer the question of what. Okay, so these are the questions you're going to be answering on your own, and they're from pages 5 to 10 of the Pumpkin Soup book, which I have sent you copies of by email. Now, the first question, why did the duck wake up early? Number 2, how did the duck reach the spoon? Number 3, what reason did the cat give for why duck could not stir the soup? Number 4, why did the duck not want to stay at the house? Number 5, what did the cat and the squirrel do while they waited at home for duck? And number 6, why wasn't the soup tasty? Okay, remember, look at our question words at the beginning of the question and it'll help you to tell what you're looking for. Okay, and also look for words from the question in the book, okay, because that will also help you to find them. Now, brilliant year 2, well done today. So I'd like you to go away, read the book again that I've sent you and have a go at answering the questions. And when you've finished, send them to the office so I can have a look how you've been doing, okay? And I'm looking forward to doing more work on this. So next reading lesson, we're going to be looking at inference for the story, okay? So looking at clues in the story. So yeah, have a brilliant rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson. Bye.